Hello, everybody. Hello. Oh, New York. Oh my gosh, we have so many people here from so many different places. I'm so excited. It's nice to see some of you I've seen before. For those of you I haven't met, my name is Katie. I'm a pastry chef. I'm also an educator here with Michaels. And we're in the midst of like all these fun Valentine's Day classes, which are so much fun. And today I think is the fanciest of all the classes we've done. It's a heart-shaped truffle box. So if you haven't made truffles before, I feel like today is like a very fun day. It will get messy just a little bit. So if you are baking or working along, we're not really baking today, but if you're working along, grab some gloves if you have them, and that should help keep things a little bit more neat. But we will be creating this amazing heart-shaped truffle box. I'm going to be using this heart-shaped mold from Michaels. It's a three-part mold. So it's like incredibly easy to use, much easier, I think, than a silicone mold, which they can be like a little hard to unmold if you've used those before. They're just very heavy. This plastic, it just kind of like pops right out. Not to jinx it. I don't want to jinx it, but hopefully it'll go really well today. But if you do want to come down, Kana, I could show you guys what we're working with. This does look like a lot of stuff, but don't worry, it's not anything crazy. But I do have, I think the most important part here is I have candy melts, and I did just start melting them in the microwave a couple of minutes ago just so they'd be ready to go. Today I have this sort of like pink color. It started red, and then I realized I didn't have enough red. So I added some white. So we sort of got this pink, which I actually really like. So I'm into that. But you do want to melt your candy melts so that they're nice and smooth. Don't overheat them. You don't want to scorch them, but I did heat them in about 30-second intervals just until they were mostly melted, probably about 3/4 of the way melted. And then I just took them out and just stirred them until they were melted completely. So this way I was sure I wasn't going to overheat them in the process. So that's going to be to create our box. So that's step one. Now, step two is going to be we're going to create a chocolate ganache. So depending on what kind of chocolate you love, you can use any kind of chocolate for this, whether it's white, milk, dark, bittersweet, any percentage, any variety will work well. We'll talk about how to adjust the ratio of heavy cream to chocolate based on the chocolate that you're using, because that will change a little bit. But I'm working with 6 ounces of dark chocolate, and I have this really nice, these like big febs of dark chocolate here, which are really lovely. And then I've got 1/2 cup of heavy cream in a pot ready to go, or you can heat this in the microwave as well if you prefer. I've got a little butter just to sort of enrich my truffles a little bit, make that mouth feel a little bit more velvety and yummy. A little bit of salt to balance the sweetness. And I'm flavoring mine today with bourbon, just because I thought it'd be fun. But you can use any kind of flavoring you love, whether it's vanilla extract, you can add a pinch of spice, maybe cardamom or cinnamon, almond extract, really anything that you love, a little orange zest, whatever you feel will work for flavoring these really nicely. Then we're gonna roll our truffles. So we're rolling our truffles by hand. We're not molding our truffles. So some gloves would be very helpful for this purpose, but you don't have to. If you don't have gloves, that's okay. It's just you're gonna have to wash your hands a couple of times, that's all. And I do have a scoop to kind of help me as well. This is also optional, but if you have one, this is just a 1 tablespoon size scoop, and that makes a pretty nice truffle. And to coat my truffles, I'm probably going to feel it out depending on the time. I'll use a little extra melted chocolate to coat. We could do it that way, or I have some variety of things. Like I've got some crushed pistachios, some sprinkles. Funny enough, this is a weird day. I ran out of cocoa powder. So I'm using hot cocoa mix to coat my truffles, which I thought would be really fun. And actually, I'm kind of excited about it. So this is my hot cocoa coating. But typically I use a nice dark cocoa powder, like a Dutch process cocoa powder to coat my truffles. But I think that's it. Tools, nothing too crazy. I have an offset spatula just to help me clean up my molds. That would work nicely. If you don't have one of those, you could use a bench scraper would work well. A spatula will work well, even a spoon. I have a spatula also, and I do have a piping bag just to add like some extra designs to my box. But you can also just use a spoon to drizzle as well. Good. We're going to dive right in. This is a big day. So we're going to start by creating our truffle box. That's going to be step one. And then we'll move into our truffles afterward. And I do have some ganache that's already been chilled, so we don't have to rush too much on that. But when we're creating our truffle box, so I've got 12 ounces of candy melts. That's pretty much 1 bag of candy melts is 12 ounces. So I just split it into 2 bowls because, of course, my heart box is going to have 2 parts. So I'm going to do 6 ounces in the first. That's half my bag of candy melts. And then I'll save the rest for my second box. We're going to dive right in. And if anybody has questions along the way, definitely feel free, jump into the chat. Let me know if you're doing this with me. That would be so fun. But all I'm going to do is open this up and make sure that your mold is really nice and clean. So if for any reason, let's say you wash this and you've got like some watermarks and things like that, a microfiber cloth or even a paper towel with like a touch of vodka on it, and just kind of smoosh it out of there and make sure it's really nice and shiny, because the shinier your mold, the shinier your chocolate will come out. So that could be really helpful as well. All right, so we've got our 2-part mold. So I've got a top. You see on one it says top, on one it says bottom. And I've got this sort of insert here. And what that's going to do is just kind of press everything down, really make it easy to separate my mold after my chocolate has set. And you'll see tons of molds set up this way. You can find these for cocoa bombs, truffles, kind of a whole variety of things. So I'm just going to pour in my candy melts. And this is actually like really deceptively simple. So if you're looking for a really nice present to make for somebody for Valentine's Day, you'd be amazed at how quickly this can come together. But you can see once my mold is coated, I'm just going to kind of scoop my candy melts around. You can go pretty much all the way to the edge, but just try not to go over the edge. You don't want to have to clean up if you don't need to. And once we push in our insert, it's going to kind of push the chocolate around really evenly. So if there are any spots where you feel like maybe it got missed a little bit, like I have a little bit over here, I could just kind of use my spoon to push it up to the top and make sure everything is really nicely coated. Now, when you're molding truffles and things like that, you might want a really thin shell of chocolate. When you're making a box, you do want it to be a little bit on the thicker side, because once you unmold, you really don't want to pop this out and have the whole thing break apart. So it might look a little bit thick. You might say, maybe I don't need quite as much. You can try it with a single layer that's a little bit thinner, and you can always go back and touch up with a little extra if you need to. But I do think that that 6-ounce amount is really nice. It's a nice amount for this. And Mia, you forgot to melt your chocolate. That's fine. You can melt it now. Take your time. All I'm going to do is insert this. And Mary is recovering from COVID. I'm so sorry, Mary. I hope you feel okay. I have problem melting my chocolate. Do you add oil? Yeah. So depending on the type of chocolate that you're using, you'll find, like, for example, if you're using chocolate chips instead of candy melts, you may find that your chocolate isn't really becoming smooth and viscous and pourable in any way, because chocolate chips tend to have stabilizers in the mix that sort of purposely keep them from melting properly. If you imagine a chocolate chip cookie, your chocolate chips really want to stay intact in your cookie. So they sort of add those stabilizers on purpose to make sure that they aren't melting. And just to pause, you see that I'm sort of pressing this in just to kind of get the chocolate to move evenly all over. But if you are working with chocolate chips or anything that maybe has stabilizers in the mix, adding a teaspoon of vegetable oil or even vegetable shortening or coconut oil can really help it become smooth and pourable, for sure. And candy melts kind of take all the thinking out of it. You could just kind of throw those candy melts in there and you know it's going to work out. Now, if you have a little bit going over the side, don't worry about that too much. It's so thin that once we pop this out, that's just going to come right off. If you have a lot of excess in any area, make sure you kind of clean it off before you chill so you won't have issues later. But that's pretty much it. That's our first layer. So if you do notice like any air bubbles or anything like that, you can just tap it to kind of release those, but mine is nice and smooth all over. So all I'm going to do is pop this into the fridge, or in this case in class, because I'm trying to rush it, I'm probably going to pop it into the freezer just to set up a little bit more quickly. All right. I wanted to make sure that was good and tight in there. So while we wait for that first one, we're going to start making our ganache. So I'm just going to turn my heavy cream onto a low to medium heat just to bring it to a simmer. And while I do that, I'm going to grab my chocolate, and we'll talk a little bit about types of chocolate now that we're on that topic a little bit here. So if we think about types of chocolate, so I've got a dark chocolate here. It's around a 60%, even you can use something higher, 65, 70% if you like a bitter flavor in your chocolate. I'm using a high quality chocolate. So this is a couverture chocolate. And when you think about couverture chocolates, typically they tend to have more cocoa butter in the mix. And so when I melt this chocolate, it melts really smooth, really pourable, versus what we just talked about, like chocolate chips and things like that, that are a little bit thicker. They have more stabilizers in the mix, a little less cocoa butter. So they aren't going to melt as smooth. So that's kind of the difference. Now, if I'm using a high quality chocolate that's a bar, I can just chop up the same quantity. If you're using nice chocolate chips, that's helpful as well, as long as it's a nice high quality chocolate. Ideally one that has the percentage on the label. Typically you then know that it's of somewhat good quality if it's kind of listing the percentage of the chocolate. The higher the percentage of chocolate, the more bitter that chocolate will be. All right. So as soon as my cream has come to a boil, I'm going to grab one of these. And I'm just going to go ahead and add my chocolate in. Now, if I'm working with something like milk chocolate or white chocolate, those tend to have a little bit more fat and more sugar in the mix. They need less liquid to make a smooth ganache. So instead of that half cup of heavy cream, you're going to want more of a third cup of heavy cream. And yes, there is a recipe. So, oh, there isn't one on the class page. Oh, that's so silly. Kana, do you have that by any chance? Do you have that recipe for us? And while we wait for her, we're just going to let this sit for a couple of seconds. And then I'm going to start whisking. Now the heat from the cream should slowly melt the chocolate. If for any reason it doesn't melt all the way, we could just pop it back over a very low heat just until it does. And you're probably thinking, why can you put chocolate over direct heat? If you've got the heavy cream in the mix sort of protecting it, you're pretty safe. Sometimes you'll see people using a double boiler or doing it in the microwave just to avoid scorching the chocolate. But as long as you're working over a very low flame and you're just kind of heating it very briefly just to melt those final chips, you should have no issue at all. So I'm just whisking just until it gets nice and smooth. Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. So she just posted the recipe for you guys to find there. And I'm going to do exactly that. I'm going to just pop this over a very low flame just for a couple of seconds, just to warm it up, just a smidge. And in the meantime, I've got my salt and I've got my butter and a little bit of bourbon or any other flavoring that you like. All right, so we're looking pretty good. So I've got just a few pieces of unmelted chocolate. I know it's like a little dark to see, but should be nice and smooth. You should have a nice smooth consistency. And then your butter should be at room temperature, so that's going to incorporate nice and evenly in there. A little salt to balance. And I'm going to wait on the bourbon until the very end. Oh yeah. So Kimberly, so I like all kinds of chocolate, really. As long as the chocolate has a percentage on the label, you're pretty good. So I do tend to prefer, if I'm at the supermarket and I'm buying chocolate to bake with, I usually go for bar chocolate versus chocolate chips. If I'm buying a big batch of maybe like a couverture chocolate, a high quality chocolate, and they sell like little pistoles or little febs, something like, let's see, what do I have on hand here? I've got, oh, it's a very big bag, and this is 100% chocolate, but this is Ghirardelli, is very nice, or any sort of chocolate that has the percentage, and the one I'm using today is a 60%. So this is 100, but this is a 60% that I'm using. Calbo is a very nice brand. Valrhona, of course, is a very nice brand. Any sort of high quality chocolate. And the better your chocolate, the better your truffles are going to taste. Truffles really feature that chocolate. So anything that you'd really love to snack on all by itself is going to be delicious in truffles. Now, if you're flavoring with something that's liquid, like I'm using bourbon, you could be using vanilla extract. You want to kind of have a light hand because you don't want to thin out your ganache as you're mixing here, and it's not going to set up as firm as one without that liquid in the mix. If you're using something dry like spices or something like that, you can kind of just taste and adjust as you like. So once your ganache is nice and smooth, and you can kind of see how smooth and glossy that is, I'm just going to transfer this to a bowl, or you can even just keep it in the pot if that's easier, and just chill it until it's firm. So cover it up. Typically takes about 30 minutes, maybe up to an hour, but you should just be able to press it and it should feel nice and firm to the touch. And I've got one here. Let's see how we're looking. So you see, after it's chilled for a while, I can press it. It's nice and firm to the touch, but it's also a little bit just soft enough that it's pliable. So if you make this, let's say, a day ahead and you refrigerate it overnight and it's super, super firm, you can even let it stand at room temperature before you scoop for about 15 minutes or so. And that's going to help make everything a little bit easier to work with. All right, so let's grab our gloves. So I am working with a scoop, but you can also just kind of grab bits by hand. It's just going to be a little less consistent than if we're scooping. Well, and it could be helpful also if your scoop starts to get stuck. These ones have this little spring inside. If that becomes an issue, you could just run this under hot water for a couple of seconds, and that'll make everything a little bit easier. But I'm just filling it like pretty flat and just popping it out. And I'm not worrying right now about the roundness of it. I'm going to go back and hand roll these afterwards. So I'm doing scooping balls. You can see this texture is really nice. But again, if you're working with milk chocolate or white chocolate, if let's say I used a half a cup of heavy cream to 6 ounces of white chocolate, it may not work out as firm as this dark chocolate will. So in that case, you might want it to be a little bit colder if you're working with it, or you might just want to adjust that amount if you remember to beforehand. So this should make about, say, like a dozen and a half. Let's see what we get out of it. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Maybe a little shy. I'm going to give that 16. I think I was a little generous. And now's the time I can go back and just give them a quick roll. Hello. Hi, Jennifer. So now that I rolled them, you can see that shape changes a little bit, right? It's nice and round all around. And you want to work pretty quickly. If you're the type of person that has very warm hands, you're going to notice that as you work, you're like, wow, these truffles are they're really melting. If you're somebody who has cold hands like I do, you're going to have no problem at all. And I've actually seen when I was working in restaurants, people used to sometimes like run their hands in really cold water, like ice water, to try to get them to stop melting their truffles. That could be helpful. But just a quick roll. You don't want to linger too long. You don't want to heat these up. And if you do have trouble, let's say you're doing these in the summertime and they're just messing all over the place, just pop the tray just like this. Just pop it into the fridge or freezer for about 10 minutes or so just to firm it up, and then you can go ahead and keep rolling. So after this, we're going to check on our first side of that truffle box and see how we're looking here. But you can see how quick and easy these truffles are. And if you don't want to coat them at all, let's say you don't want to put a final layer of chocolate on these, which is really nice because it does give them this sort of like crunchy exterior. But if you aren't interested in that, sort of a more French style truffle, I would just chill these until firm and then just roll them in a bit of cocoa powder and just sort of call it a day. And that's delicious also. I'm going to pop these in the fridge and just let them chill until firm. And I'm going to grab that first side and see if we're ready to unroll. So let's see where we're at. Now, I don't want to rush it. I don't know how many minutes that was, but let's give it a feel. So you can always just pull off that bottom. That's not going to get in the way of anything. And you can just sort of give a little tug and see if we're firm enough to unmold. We are. So one thing you don't want to do is touch this with your hands and get your fingerprints all over. So I did mention gloves are going to be a thing today. So if you do have your gloves, and yes, you could totally wash the ones you just used for your truffles. Use those. But all I'm going to do is very carefully. You can see I took off the top and the bottom, but I'm left with this liner. All I'm going to do is very carefully go around the edge of the liner first, just to kind of loosen it up a little bit and work our way toward the center. Now, if all fails and you unmold this and it breaks right in the middle, the beauty of chocolate or candy melts is that you could just break them up again and pop them right back into the microwave and just go one more round. So it's kind of a nice, easy process. But that's our first side. So I do want to keep, thanks, Jennifer. So you do want to keep this really cold. So you notice, remember I said if you have like any of those edges, so you could just go in, if there's any little spots that's stuck that maybe aren't ideal, just with a little paring knife, you just go ahead and clean those up a little bit. If they're really stuck, you don't want to fight it. Just be really delicate. And we are going to heat this later to glue it to our other side. So worst case scenario, if there's big spots, you're going to kind of melt those off anyway. And sometimes even the warmth of your hands can kind of smooth them out a little bit. But I'm going to put this on a baking sheet, or you could just put it on a plate or anything like that. And I'm just going to keep this in the fridge until I'm ready to do the second side. So this way it's going to stay nice and cold. And you could see that mold was really shiny, so I have this beautiful shiny finish. All right. Excuse me, Truffle. All right, so before we start rolling our truffles, let's do our second side. So if your candy melts at this point have sort of set up a little bit, you can pop them right back into the microwave. And I do have some edges that are just a little warm. So I'm just going to heat it up for about 10 to 15 seconds. Ah, thanks, guys. Thanks, Monica. Thanks, Archie. Thanks, Heather. Thanks. Oh, I cannot read that from far away. Rooney, thank you so much. Is that liner reusable? Absolutely. Yeah, it is. The one thing you don't want to do is pop these into the dishwasher. You do want to wash them by hand. That goes for these and for the liner. But yeah, it's reusable every time. Just use it over and over again. Yeah, once you buy these molds, the beauty of it is you can use them every year. You could just keep them. I have like a whole bunch of different molds and things that I sort of tuck away in like a big bin, and then you could always just pull them out as you need them. All right, so same deal. I've got my top, I've got my bottom. You can see they sort of fit together. Set the bottom aside, and I'm just going to go ahead and pour into my top. Same as before. Now, if you do want to do something fun with one of the sides, before you kind of fill it up with your chosen, whether it's candy melts or chocolate, you could brush in a different color. Like I could have brushed in some white chocolate or drizzled in some white chocolate or do a little bit of gold leaf or gold luster dust. And then once you pour your chocolate in, it kind of just sets it in place, which is really lovely. But same deal, I'm just going around, avoiding going over the edge, but just sort of smushing it around. All right, and once we're looking pretty good, same thing, we're going to take our liner right back in, give it a press. So it kind of goes all the way up the edge. Make sure you've got everything really even. And then press again with our bottom. Here's my mold. Okay. So just give it a press. Make sure that chocolate goes all the way up to the top of the mold. Candy melts, rather. Give it a look, see. They're looking pretty good. Looking nice. Would sprinkles melt? It's funny. I would say the only thing about sprinkles, when you put them in a mold like this, is they sort of like sink into the candy melts. So like you don't see them as nicely as you would want to. I would say if I was doing sprinkles, and I am gonna sort of finish these with a little bit of sprinkles on the top, I'm just gonna drizzle a little extra chocolate and then sprinkle on the sprinkles so you really see them in the end. I kind of prefer that, but you could experiment with it. I don't see why not. Okay, I'm gonna pop this in the freezer. We're gonna go back to truffling, and I'm gonna throw some chocolate into the microwave just to coat our truffles. Okay, let me throw this in. Hello, truffles. And you can see they've been in for just a couple minutes or so. They're a little bit firmer, still a little soft, but firm enough. I'm gonna start to coat. So let me get all of my toppings here. I'm kind of curious how this hot cocoa situation is gonna go. Pretty excited about it. All right, so same dark chocolate as I used on the inside, I'm going to use for the outside. So all I'm doing is sort of melting in 30-second spurts just until it's smooth. And you only typically want to melt chocolate about 2/3 of the way. We sort of talked about melting candy melts maybe 3/4 of the way. Same goes when you're melting chocolate. About 2/3 of the way when you're melting chocolate is perfect because that enables you to go in and kind of mix in the remaining chocolate without overheating your chocolate. That's kind of a way to quickly temper your chocolate, without worrying too much about getting into testing the temperature and things like that, or marbling or adding any more chocolate into the mix. All right, so another 30 seconds. I'm just giving a little stir. And this is just going to give our truffles like a nice outer shell. Make them really extra yummy. All right, we're going to go a little bit more. And Kane, I see a few people in the waiting room, just a heads up. Are those silicone bowls? They are. I love those. Yes. Yeah, these silicone bowls. I got a pack of these at Michael's. It came in like 4 of them. And I find that now I use them for everything. They're just a very convenient size. I do love them. All right. So you can see now my chocolate is really melty, but I've got some left unmelted, which is perfect. So I'm just sort of stirring to melt. And this is where we're really going to get our hands involved in the process. So again, gloves are sort of recommended here. You could also dip these truffles. If you have dipping tools, you could just dip them, plunge them right into your chocolate. Can you use Wilton's Chocolate Pro Melting Pot? You could, definitely. Yeah. I find the microwave is just so quick and easy. But yeah, you could do that, definitely. All right. So just set my spoon aside. I'm going to grab a fork just to help me out. And also you want a clean surface to put these on once they're rolled. So whether that's a plate, another small baking sheet, really anything that you've got, you want something to put the finished truffles on. So we're ready. So this is hand rolled. This is classic. I take a little bit of chocolate on my fingers, right in the palm of my hand. And now all I'm going to do is roll my truffle in my chocolate. So a little bit more. Quick roll. And it's coated. Now, if I'm coating in something like cocoa powder, or in my case, hot cocoa mix today, I'm going to let this set before I dust it. If I'm rolling in something like sprinkles or pistachios, I want my chocolate to still be melty when I go in there. So I'm just going to plunk it right on in. And the beauty of something like a ramekin is you can kind of just shake it all around. Give it a little shake, shake. And just coat it completely in whatever you feel like. And that could be, you could leave them just plain chocolate. You could coat them in nuts. You can coat them in sprinkles. Anything that you prefer is great. And then just set it aside. So I'm just going to continue on. So maybe we'll do some that are plain, some that are coated. So my plain ones, I'm just going to pop them right back on. And you see when I sort of let go of them, I am sort of leaving like a little excess chocolate. You want it to be like a little melty. And once that sets, I'll show you what that looks like because it's kind of pretty and fun and kind of rustic. So we have some plain ones. Maybe I'll do one with the sprinkles. Another pistachio. There is something about truffles just coated in cocoa powder that I just really love. They're like really soft and luscious all the way through. You just sort of bite right into them. You can see even with gloves, look how messy. Kind of the nature of truffles. It's always going to be a little messy. Do, 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 do. Come with me. These are kind of fun for a Valentine's Day box. It's kind of fun to have like a colorful one. Do one more of those. You can see how fast truffles come together. Oh, I just sprinkled. They are very quick. You can make so many truffles in such a short period of time. All right, I'm down to my last one here. And this is fun for kids, but it really does get amazingly messy very, very fast. All right, last guy. Doo-doo-doo. All right, I'm going to set these aside. Clean my arm. Ooh, he's stuck. Get off of there. All right, and now the ones that are sort of setting up, we're just going to coat in cocoa powder. So let me move these out of the way. And we did this hand rolling technique with small peanut butter Easter eggs. It's funny because the Easter eggs, you really want them to keep that sort of like oval shape. If I'm thinking of the right thing, I would say no, you should hand dip for those with your little dipper tool. You can kind of plunge right in. That would be the best way to do it. But when you're dipping, keeping them really nice and cold, the colder they are, the deeper your container of chocolate, the easier the process will be for sure. But yeah, I love hand rolling because it's just so fast. So easy. All right, so once they're set, and you could see because my truffles were chilled, they're already kind of set. And you could see like how I left a little excess. It just makes them look like a little more fun. I'm just gonna pop it in and just coat it up. And if I was using something like cocoa powder, typically after you coat, you give it one more roll just to kind of shake off the excess. And that gives it just a really nice kind of fancy finish, which is fun. I kind of like this hot cocoa mix. If you missed it at the beginning of class, I didn't realize until right before class that I was out of cocoa powder. So we went with hot chocolate because you got to make it work. But I kind of like it. I feel like this is good. All right, so in a few minutes, we're going to unmold our final layer of our box, and then we're going to glue the two sides together. Pluck in our truffles. I'm going to leave some plain because that always looks nice. To have a couple of plain ones. Right, so cute. All right, so the one thing you will need, would you, they'll be extra sweet. Yeah, definitely. So the one thing you will need to glue these two sides together is a large pan or a baking sheet. Depending on how you want to do it, essentially we're going to heat one side of our mold to adhere it to the other. So until I'm ready to use these guys, I'm going to keep these in the refrigerator just so they won't melt on me. But you can see like how cute they are. And I'm going to grab that second mold. We'll see if it's ready. So let's check out what we've got. And already I can see I have a couple of thin spots here. So I'm a little nervous about it. Let's see what happens. Oh, yeah. All right. So if this happens, we're just going to go back and check that. Hold on 1 second. Let's see what we can do. But we are going to see if it's ready to pop out first. Now, because I probably have a thicker layer at the bottom, it's probably not quite ready. We can always do it one more time if we need to. Let's see what we can do with this. Now, if it's really bad, like here I've got a spot that's empty here, I'm just going to brush on a little bit extra. Oh my God, you're filling yours with Dunkin' Donuts munchkins. That's so good. Oh my gosh, that's so cute. I love that. All right, so I have like a little extra candy melts. I don't have much. So I'm gonna see what I can do here. I'm gonna salvage what I've got in the microwave. Hold on. But we also might just be able to go with it. Let's see what we can do. A little more. I'm pretty good all the way around, except for this one big area. And a little bit extra here, not much. So all I'm going to do is take some of my excess, and you could use a paintbrush for this as well, which might even be a little bit easier. Just going to go in and just add where I'm missing. We'll pop it right back into our mold so it sets nice and smooth. Can add a little bit more here as well. But again, if for some reason you take it on, you're like, oh my gosh, it just didn't work out, just break it up, pop it right back in the microwave, and do it one more time. So I'm going to chill this a few more seconds. We're going to use that as our base. I have Guatemalan ceremonial grade cacao. Would that be too bitter for dusting? Oh, that sounds delicious. I think as long as you taste it and you like it, you could always dip, a truffle in there and give it a try. See how it tastes. All right. So I do have a really nice big pan. So this is a pan that I know that I will be able to fit my heart into. If you don't have a pan that's that big, maybe on hand, or one that's non-stick, I would definitely just heat up a baking sheet in your oven. You could just set your oven to about 350, warm up your baking sheet. It doesn't need to be piping hot. You can imagine how quickly chocolate or candy melts melt. So just a little bit on the warmer side. And then we're going to sort of use that to melt part of our chocolate box. If that scares you, you can also take a little bit of extra candy melts in a piping bag and just pipe along the edge and then just use that to stick them together as well. And to answer Deb's question, unlimited amount of times. I've definitely reused candy melts, I don't know, at least 5 times without issues. If anything starts to change, in terms of, you know, the look of the look of the candy melts. If they start to look like a little, if you see any white dots or any granular kind of texture running through or anything like that, then I would say it's probably enough. But as long as it's still smooth and it still melts really nice and shiny, you should be good to break it up and microwave it again for sure. That's kind of the best part of candy melts. Chocolate can go in and out of temper, and it can cause issues like sugar bloom or fat bloom, but something like candy melts, you could do multiple times. All right, so let's see if we're any better here. And we can always use this as our base because you always need a bottom. Let's see when we unmold this, if we can get away with it. It's so delicate. And because it's my bottom, I'm not worrying too much about my gloves, but ideally always wear gloves. Yeah, we have some edges here. I just did not press hard enough. So if it were me and I had extra time, I would totally break this up and do it one more time. But today we're going to go with it. All right, so our very sad bottom is going to go on the bottom. And we're going to use that for our bottom there. So because we're using it as our base, let's grab our pan. I'm going to heat this up. I'm going to grab my top, which is so pretty and perfect. So no one will ever know. We're going to keep it a secret. I've got my truffles. And the first thing we're going to do is, because this situation happened, I'm just going to break off some of that excess that I know is not going to last here. So let me trim this a little bit. This will actually be perfect for melting in our pan. All right. So before I get too crazy about melting this down, I'm going to set this aside. And what I'm going to do is just use the heat of the pan just to kind of melt off some of that excess. So as soon as it's warm enough, I'm going to grab that guy. All right, so he's a little bit warm, and I'm going to grab gloves also. I'm going to pop him in there. Come with me. I'm just melting him just a bit, and it kind of works well for in this case because I had such a sad result going on. I'm kind of just melting off some of those areas that I didn't love just to kind of flatten it off, which is helpful. Now I can go ahead and fill up my truffles. Hello, truffles. Mm-hmm. I'm going to save one of these to eat also. We'll fill in that sad area. I'm going to save a cocoa one for me. Stay there. And now I'm going to do the same thing with my top. So hopefully it's still warm enough. Just very gently. Just enough. And just pick him up. And just kind of use that warmth just to glue the two together. And it should just kind of set up. You can run your fingers around just to kind of clean up the edges a little bit. That actually worked out pretty well. It kind of evened out in the end there. And now's when you can kind of just finish it with any decorations that you like. So if you have a little extra candy melt or a little extra chocolate, like for example, I have the chocolate I melted before, I could pop a little bit of that into a piping bag. Thanks, Rose. We really saved it in the end, right? It was dicey there for like a minute or so, but we saved it. I'm just gonna take a little extra of that. You're so nervous. I'm so sorry, Jim. If you think you were nervous, imagine how I felt, you know? I got all you guys here watching me. How do you think I was handling? Yeah, I was nervous too, for sure. Thanks, Phoebe. All right, so I have a little chocolate. And you can really do anything you like with this, but I think it's fun just to kind of cut like a very small hole and get your sprinkles or anything else. I have like some gold dragées that are really pretty. And just test this before you do it. Make sure it's like a nice thin stream. Yeah, pretty good. And then you can kind of do anything you like, but maybe like a little bit over here. Keeping it in one area is kind of pretty while it's still wet. Sprinkle on your decoration. Could do a little luster spray. That would be really pretty. Now tell me in the chat, should I break through it while we're here in class or should I save it just like this? Because I think the whole fun of these is breaking in, but I don't want to destroy it if you think I should like give it to my husband or something, I could do that. Something fun like that, I guess. Save it. See, you guys are so nice. You're right. I should save it. He deserves a nice truffle box. Well, anyway, here we are. Here's our truffle box. Truffles inside. Break it and make one for him. I don't know if I want to, but I will bite into one of the truffles so you could see how yummy it is on the inside. Like, look at it's hard to see the texture, but it's so luscious, so soft, so creamy. So good. Really nice. And I do love the chocolate around the outside because it does add just that extra little shell, which is so delicious. Got a little bourbon. Oh, it's yummy. Store this in the refrigerator for sure. And you don't really want any condensation on the surface. So I would put it in some sort of larger container, like an airtight container, even like a cake, container or anything like that, just to keep it really safe. You can glue it onto any sort of board with a little bit of extra melted chocolate if you want to keep it from moving around. And in the fridge, even the truffles will stay up to a week or so in the fridge in an airtight container. Or if you want to freeze them, they'll stay even longer if you keep these two things separate. But all assembled like this, I would say you probably have about a week or so in an airtight container. And then you could just package it in cellophane, put some beautiful ribbons, and then you have a really lovely Valentine's Day treat. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I know, Mia, I never get to really watch you work along, but that's so amazing. Good job, Mia. I'm going to preemptively say Mia did an amazing job, even though I cannot see it. Wait, can I see it? Let me see. Let me see if I could see Mia. But thank you guys so much. For anybody else oh, Mia, that's amazing. Oh, Mia, you got it. Great. Oh, that's so cool. Oh, I'm so proud. Amazing. So cool. Thank you guys so much. Definitely check us out on Instagram. Come back next week. Instagram is Learn with Michael, so you can check out upcoming classes there. There's a great class coming up next week, which I believe is the Valentine's Day heart cake, which is so delicious. That's probably my favorite chocolate cake recipe, and it has a chocolate ganache glaze. It's like over the top, yummy, yummy. So definitely come back for that. But thank you so much. Happy early Valentine's Day. Stay safe. Bye.